Welcome to Section 420, Talkin Yankees, the podcast. Well, I've been seeing a lot of chatter, not only, of course, with Michael Kane, some of his comments he made recently with his show, regarding that the Yankee roster from 2026 is not identical to the Yankee roster of 2025. And, of course, this is bouncing off a lot of stuff you're seeing on social media, and a lot of fans were posting funny memes where going into 2026 with the same team as 2025 and jokingly and all that matter there. So, going to kind of piggyback, not just saying exactly what Michael K said, I kind of agree with him on the whole point there, but just kind of reiterate a lot of areas where you're not starting 2026 the same way you started 2025. I know the way you ended the season, we got a lot of the same faces going into the next season there, but the Yankees did make a lot of big moves and had a lot of big injuries from last season in terms of guys coming back this year, and then kind of starting off, step one with guys, that you're starting off that you got at the trade deadline that you didn't have to start last season. So again, no, this is not the same exact team entering the year. So kind of look at all that, and of course, Cashman is always busy on the waiver wire. A couple of familiar faces gone already. Caleb Ort, his long, illustrious Yankee career of 0 games, is already gone, designated for assignment. The Yankees making a couple of moves, minor moves on the waiver wires, and these guys probably won't even be here by, in a couple of months from now. So, but let's at least get you caught up there if you'll miss any of that. So, before we get started, make sure you subscribe to this podcast, Section 420 Talkin Yankees, the podcast, wherever you get your favorite podcast. And there's also the YouTube version of the show. So, afterwards, go to YouTube, search for Section 420 Talkin Yankees, and subscribe there as well. So I've been seeing this over the past couple of weeks, this, whether it's on Instagram, Facebook, a lot of the Yankee fans and content creators is kind of, using maybe like identical twins and like, all right, going to 2026 with the 2025 team and so forth. And yeah, a lot of that's in good fun and good humor, and I can understand the bulk of that, but if you really want to dissect the whole thing, that's not exactly the case. I think the Yankees are going in with I'm not going to say a far superior team than the start of last season, but definitely a much better team than they started off with last April. That's just a matter of fact. From the starting rotation to defense to the bullpen. Now, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but at least they're in a better position than they were if you want to base on what we saw from the results of 2025. And we'll kind of go through all those different areas. First of all, look at the starting rotation, or maybe go too far ahead of ourselves. Just look at the players who are gone, who are not on this team, who we went to war with the start of last season. One of them, of course, being Goldschmidt at first base. Now, I would say overall Goldschmidt was good and serviceable for the Yankees, in 2025. Got off to a great start. Unfortunately, had some injuries, specifically his knee injury, really slowed him down in the second half, and he was pretty much a non-factor really the second half of the season. Had a good start of the year, but unfortunately, 37, I think his body started to give out a little bit. Never lost his foot with the defense there, but unfortunately hitting-wise there was pretty much a non-factor. I think having a full season, or obviously Ben Rice is probably going to get a majority of the playing time at first base, and we saw Ben Rice have a good 2025 there, and we weren't too sure about him. There's, he came up, had that great 2024, had that great game against Boston when he hit the 3 home runs, but unfortunately had to get sent down when he wasn't hitting anymore. So really there was some question marks around him for 2025, but did recoup and had himself a good 2025 season, 22 home run year, and had a big 2-run home run in one of the that was game 2 against Boston in that wild card round there. So I think just having a younger 25-year-old Ben Rice there for a full season versus last year where he was kind of splitting time with Goldschmidt, I think that makes the Yankees a better first base situation. Now defense there, Ben Rice could be a little bit better, and again, not say you hold your breath there, he could get better, but there is room for him to prove there. But this is one example from there. Obviously, we look at the back end of the bullpen. We were hoping with 2025 to rely heavily on Luke Weaver on the good work he did during the 2024 playoff run. And, of course, then you bring in Devin Williams here, who's considered, at least at the time, one of the top closers in baseball. And you figure, all right, you just make this really a 6-inning game. The Yankees will be on easy street. Well, Williams was devastatingly bad to start the season and got to the point where he lost his closer role, and Weaver wasn't that much better. Was he as disappointing as Williams was? No, but we did not get the 2024 version of Luke Weaver, and again, Devin Williams was so bad, he ended up losing his job as the de facto closer there. So I think just for the fact that you don't have those two players now here, they're actually ironically both in Queens there, I think that makes the Yankees stronger. And of course, right now, probably look at guys in the back end bullpen such as Doval and Bednar. Now, we don't know how Doval and Bednar are going to perform. Obviously, it'll be the phase 2, part 2 for them with them. But they can't be any worse than Weaver and Williams, who were just absolutely dreadful, especially again Williams. It was just so dreadful. They had to yank him out of the close role, where just a year before he was considered perhaps maybe one of the top 3 closers in baseball there. So again, that alone just makes the 2026 Yankees better. Just in that one specific example I'll give you there. Another name who's not with this team last year, who we had to start the season last year, that's of course Marcus Stroman. Again, there was some controversy with him throughout the spring. Is he going to be a starter or not? Is he going to be in the bullpen? And there was some disgruntledness by him that, almost refusing to accept a bullpen role. He just got a little bit lucky there with the Cole injury, as well as Luis Gil wasn't going to be ready until later on in the year there. It opened up a door, then the Yankees were able to dodge a bullet and avoid that controversy. Well, Stroman was not good for the Yankees at all in 2025. Got off to a bad start, had the bad knee, was on the IL for a long while, and even he came back, didn't get the Yankees much, and it got to a point where even though he was making $18 million a year, they just flat out had to cut him because he just could no longer perform on the major league level. Well, good news here that 2026, he's not even an equation. So that alone, just by not having him in your rotation to start the year, makes the Yankees stronger. And now you have some other options, someone like Cam Schlittler, for example, or someone like Luis Gil, who the Yankees did not have till later on in the season. So that in itself is an improvement above how you started off your year last year with the Yankees. DJ LeMahieu, another big name, who the Yankees eventually had to cut bait with after 45 games. Now, they tried one last hurrah with him, but unfortunately, just after a handful of games, it's just, at least they gave more of a handful. 45 games is about 1/3 of the season where you can make an evaluation on a player. And just look, he was not the same player anymore. Defensively, he could at least be okay-ish, but just was giving you nothing offensively, and it's got to the point where it's similar with Aaron Hicks. They just had to flat-out cut him. He was making $15 million a year. It just got to the point you just could not be carrying this guy anymore, and they decided to cut bait. So that alone, another huge example where now this time, you have Ryan McMahon there at third base. He's about 30 years old, healthy, defensively. Whatever he's going to give you is much better than you got from DJ LeMahieu. The side of LeMahieu's defense was terrible, but offensively, yeah, he's probably going to hit around 230, 240 there, but he's got pop in the bat. He's going to hit home runs. Whatever he gives you is going to be much better than DJ LeMahieu. So that in itself is just getting another check mark why the Yankees are stronger going into 2026 than they were at 2025 there. So just another point there. And of course, Yankees with some role players, bench players. I don't want to read into too much, but when you got like Pablo Reyes, for example, that game in Kansas City, ran around and ran over third base and fell on the floor and stuff like that. You don't have that on the bench. I mean, the Yankees have a much stronger bench. And you have players like Ahmad Rosario, of good veterans like that. And we'll see what happens with the Yankees outfield. But the Yankees are in a better situation. You also have Oswald Cabrera coming back. As you remember, he started the year with the Yankees last year. Unfortunately, injured his ankle in that game against Seattle. Really, that's really the start where the Yankees had that huge pitfall across the entire summer. It almost started with the Cabrera injury. Well, guess what? Cabrera's back to start the year. And, okay, could he get injured again? We don't know. But for the most part, he's going to be there in the mix. And then, again, as a role player off the bench, that's the reason you had someone like Pablo Reyes and Yobat Vivas. Yobat Vivas were terrible, but you're not going to have someone like Pablo Reyes tripping over third base. You're going to have, again, a better bench with guys like Oswaldo Cabrera as well as Ahmad Rosario. So that in itself just makes this team a plus versus what you had, how you started your season with last year. And then this has a few examples there, but you want to also look at the trade deadlines, the guys they bought in already. So people want to look at the offseason itself, but again, the Yankee offseason kind of even started before that. It started at the 2025 trade deadline, and they brought in David Bednar. They brought in Jake Bird. Now, Jake Bird, unfortunately, had a lot of innings under his arm there, and I think it was gassed out. I'm not even sure why Cashman did that move there, but again, they shut him down early. I would have faith that he would have a much better return on your dollar for Jake Bird versus before, and whatever Jake Bird has there, I'm sure he's going to be more effective probably than what you were getting with Mark Leiter Jr., who the Yankees decided to let slip away at the end of the season. And you mentioned before what they brought in Ryan McMahon, brought in Ahmad Rosario. Again, the Yankees are probably one of the more active teams at the trade deadline, and no one really is giving Cashman a trophy for that. But again, the reason the Yankees have to make a ton of moves again in this particular offseason because they plugged up a lot of those holes during last year's trade deadline. And then again, that was third base by getting both Ahmad Rosario and Ryan McMahon in there, kind of plug up the hole you had at third base with no DJ, no Oswald Cabrera. They shored up the bullpen, bringing in Bednar, Jake Bird, and Camilo Doval, and as well as Cabrera. who's also back this season, could play all outfield positions, could play shortstop. He's probably the odd man in for the shortstop job, at least to start the year with, Volpe still, out as he's kind of recovering from the shoulder surgery. But again, he steals bases. He could create a little havoc on the base. I think the Yankees want to bring a lot of that in here. And again, they're not just always relying on the home run, but again, also wreaking some havoc on bases. So you have a weapon like that to start the 2026 season. You did not really have a weapon like that to start the 2025 season. So again, the Yankees already had all these pieces ready set up before even entered this particular postseason. So they made a lot of improvements beforehand. There wasn't really a ton of moves to make. The only really move they were looking to make was to retain Cody Bellinger. And the other things we want to consider as well. Just look at who's going to be there at least at the start of the season. Well, if you want to look at 2025, now we didn't find this out till spring training. Well, Stanton had the elbow issue where it looks like we weren't going to have him to start the season, and possibly we have him to the whole year. Now, luckily, he did got the injections. Took almost 3 rounds of injections into his elbow, and he needed some rehab as well. Then finally Yankees got him back by the midway of the season. Well, at least at this point, unless there's going to be some breaking news, the Yankees are going to have Stanton from day one. So that in itself, just have Stanton available day one for the 2026 season, makes them a better team versus how they entered the 2025 season. And of course, Garrett Cole will be back at some point as well, maybe mid-season. Again, we're not exactly sure from his Tommy John surgery. That in itself makes it a strength. You didn't have him at all for 2025. And of course, kind of mentioned before with not having Stroman in there, but instead having just the likes of Cam Schlittler and Luis Heel. Again, that in itself makes the Yankees a stronger team. So yeah, would be nice to sign Kyle Schwarber as well to a 5-year deal and have him play first base, and then you package Ben Rice and someone else to get to get maybe a left field or something like that, and then you sign Bellinger, and then maybe you make a trade with somebody and Spencer Jones to bring Skubal in here and have the super team. Look, that's just not reasonable. That wasn't going to happen. And well, the Dodgers do this, Dodgers do that. Yeah, the Dodgers also they just do a lot of straight up free agency. And I mean, they don't do like a ton of trades. I mean, a lot of stuff they just flat out buy a player on the free agency market there. So you guys got to operate reason, have some sensibility. If you have Ben Rice and what he could give you, why are you going to shell out like $30 million to Kyle Schwarber? Is Kyle Schwarber a better player than Ben Rice and a more feel-free hitter? Yeah, but if Kyle Schwarber's only hit 30 home runs and you have to pay him all that money, you're paying Ben Rice like what? Not even maybe $1 million to give you maybe 80% of that type of production. You're just not going to make that move to Kyle Schwarber. So you have to have a sort of sense of sensibility there. And in terms of trading someone like Skubal, great, I would like to Skubal, but Detroit's going to want the earth, moon, stars, and sun for him. Okay, you trade, let's say you pull off that trade. It's the same thing like Soto. You got him as a 1-year rental. He's going to hit the free agency market because he's just going to get the biggest contract possible there. And you kind of trade all these prospects for it's a one-time hurrah, which, I don't know, maybe you get a championship out of it, maybe you don't. Now, in the case of Soto, I think it was totally worth doing it, and at least it got the Yankees to the World Series there. But you're not going to do that for Skubal because, all right, you put Skubal in there, fine, but you already have Max Fried, you have Rendon, you have Cole come back, you have Schlittler. You're not going to give all your assets, all your blue chips, all your top prospects up for Skubal for a 1-year rental when he's going to hit free agency. So, again, you have to operate within a line of reason there. So, all up and down the Yankee lineup. The starting rotation, definitely better 2026 than you had in 2025. Okay, a lot of the same names on the position players, but you do have, major upgrades at third base with McMahon over DJ. At late to this point, I think, you do have somewhat of an upgrade of Cabrera starting the year at shortstop versus Volpe. Now, let's say Volpe comes back and the shoulder's healed up and maybe some time away, he just gets his head clear and he just becomes a better player. Okay, fine there. Jazz, you're fine with. It's a push there at second base. And Ben Rice, I just think a full season of Ben Rice 2026 is going to be better than the platoon situation of Rice and Goldschmidt that you had in 2025. And, J.C. Escar is still on the rosters there. So, you might see a little J.C. Escar. You might also see a little bit Ben Rice backing up Austin Wells there. And Austin Wells, when I see at that position, that's a push, more or less there. I don't think Wells will be dramatically better than he was 26 and 25, but more or less going to be the same there. But you just worry about his defense most of all. Judge in right field, you don't worry about him. Trent Grisham, you don't worry about him. Is he going to hit 30-plus home runs? Maybe not, but I'm maybe concerned about his defense there in center field. Now, I'm sure he'll have a decent season, probably between 20 and 30 home runs. He'll probably hit around the same 240 more or less there. But, again, that's a push. And then left field right now, it's going to be probably mostly Bellinger, more or less a push. I don't think his number is going to be dramatically more or less in there. Kind of moons Dominguez to the bench there. Now, it makes a stronger bench by having him there. We'll see, do the Yankees end up trading him or not? I think I'll hold on to him. But again, he's a guy that started left field. Yeah, okay, if he's not starting left field, at least he's on your bench. You have a stronger bench. And, of course, in the DH spot, again, unless there's some breaking news about his elbows balking him again, you'll have Stanton there day one as your DH versus waiting for Stanton there in July. So, all up and down and in the bullpen. This is a better team in 2026 than you did in 2025. So I just don't know what other moves there were to make. Getting Kyle Tucker and Bellinger and this and that. I mean, there's just no room for all these guys there. And I just think there's really mission one was securing Bellinger, and they did that. So I just don't think there's any other moves, and they probably don't feel there's any other moves to make at that point. I guess if Edward Diaz is out there, could they maybe gone after him? Possibly. I mean, I guess he was out there. He did opt out and end up going to the Dodgers. So, possibly the Yankees could have used Edward Diaz, but it didn't seem like they were interested in him and committing to 3 years to him when they have Bednar. Now, obviously, Diaz is way better than Bednar right now, but, if you have Bednar able to lock down the games and you have him under control for the foreseeable future, it does make sense to shell out $70 million. It probably would have taken to get Diaz in there. So I can understand why the Yankees just want to stand packed there. So did the Yankees make blockbuster moves in the offseason? No, but because they had a team kind of already set from the moves they made at the trade deadline, and just with the fact you have some guys coming in like Garrett Cole, you have Cam Schlittler, who we didn't even know about last year. Well, now we know what he could do, and we know what he could do in a playoff game, and you're going to have him there at least to start the year, and hopefully he's stretched out enough that you get a full season out of him. Up and down the roster, this 2026 Yankee team is, I'm not going to say, twice as good as last year, but strongly marginal better there. You're not walking in with the identical team there. You don't have as many question marks as you did last year, and the Yankees are shored up and beefed up in a lot of different areas than they were last year there. So I feel bad. And again, with all the problems they had last year, they still won 94 games, still got tied for first place in the AL East there. It's just unfortunately Toronto beat the stuffings out of them for most of the year, so they had to settle for the wild card and kind of go through that route. I mean, if they just had like Cole for the whole year, if they just had Stant for the whole year, you're probably looking at a team that wins more than 94 games. So I think this will be a stronger team. I'm not going to say they're going to win 100 games there, but this looks like a better team than at least they were back in April of 2025. Now, as I promised, the Yankees also made some waiver wire moves. So Ort, who the Yankees picked off the waiver wires a couple weeks ago, again, Houston had to cut him from their active roster to make room for Tatsuya Imai. So the Yankees picked him up, hard throwing right-hander. Didn't have a good 2025, but had a good 2024, and so maybe had some problems to him. But unfortunately, Yankees decided part ways with him, picking up Michael Ciani from the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now the Dodgers cut Ciani because they had to make room for Kyle Tucker. So it's a situation that that he was valuable, but I guess he was kind of low on the totem pole there, so they needed to make room on their active roster, so they cut him. The Yankees picking up, and they had a dump DFA Ort in order to make room for Ciani. Now, Ciani, he's not an offensive guy at all. He's just basically a glove guy. He's a defensive guy. He's also a speedster on the bag. So, this is why Cashman wants with guys like Cabrera and Ciani. Now, I don't know how long he was going to be here. He might just be dumped next week like Ort was, but nevertheless, as well, just bringing some speeds as guys could create some havoc on the bases. Again, we've been complaining about this as Yankee fans for years. They don't run the bases well. They don't steal bases. Teams like the Dodgers, they go first to home. They steal bases. They do hit and runs. All these little, they got the boppers, but they also play a lot of small ball. I think the Yankees want to try to get into some of that as well, and this is a weapon they could do. He's a left-handed hitter, throws left-handed. So, it's almost like similar to a Seth Brown, who the Yankees also gave a minor league contract to a couple of weeks ago, formerly of the Athletics organization there. So you're not going to expect much with this guy with the bat. He has had a 4-year career. In those 4 years, he's been a .227 hitter with an entire 2 home runs to his credit and 20 RBIs. So this is not an offensive guy as well, and he's under team control at least till 2031 when he will become a free agent. Now, one good thing about him is that he does have one option left, so if he doesn't break camp with the team, he could be on the bench to start the year, or he does have one option left. The Yankees could have him start the year in AAA and just kind of keep him in AAA until they need him. Maybe someone gets injured, something happens, someone pulls a hammy, and he could come up and play some defense as well as be a pinch runner and maybe steal a bag in a big situation there. So that's him. Also with that in mind, earlier, Yankees also picking up another guy off the waiver wires. And then let me get back to Ciani for a moment there, just to show you how guys that come on and off. So he actually finished the season with the Cardinals. Afterwards, he was DFA'd, picked up by the Braves, DFA'd, and then picked up by the Dodgers, and then they DFA'd the guy after they made the deal for Tucker. So this guy's been bounced around 3 teams within like a month. So very easy. The Yankees also might bounce him as well there, because it's a waiver wire move. I wouldn't pay much attention to it, but it's just worth mentioning. And of course, let me get back to Marco Luciano, who was designated for assignment by the Baltimore Orioles. Now, he finished the season with the San Francisco Giants last year. He played 2 years with the Giants, a total of 41 games, where another whopping batting average here of 217, 3 RBIs and 1 stolen base. But of course, he's known for his defensiveness, so he's not really an offensive player, but he could play both shortstop and second base. And you can see why the Yankees might want to throw him into the mix. Obviously, shortstop until Volpe comes back is going to be a bit of an open competition. We all kind of assume Caballero is going to be like the leading man there, but some other guys might be in play. As mentioned before, Oswaldo Cabrera is going to be back. He's going to be in the mix. Maybe if he has an impressive spring training, maybe he wins the shortstop job. You also have Ahmad Rosario. Now, I think Rosario at this point in his career is probably more of a third baseman. He could also play some outfield, but technically Rosario could be in the mix for that if he has an impressive spring training. And of course, at some point Volpe comes back, but I guess this guy Luciano, just to throw him in there. And of course, he could also play second base, just to get some, spelled Jazz. If Jazz, you want to give Jazz a day off, if Jazz gets himself hurt, to pull out of the game, you have Luciano, but you also have Cabrera, who can also play second base. It's a good thing about Cabrera, Oswaldo Cabrera, he can play all infield positions, in a pinch. He can pretty much play every position except catcher there, so valuable to have him on bench. Guy's 24 years old. Now with him, he's a little different situation. Yeah, he's not going to be a free agent until 2032. He's not going to be this long here in the Yankee uniform that long, but he's out of options. So basically, Yankees are going to have to make a decision on him when they break camp. Do you want to put him on the active roster, or they're going to have to designate him for assignment because he has no more options to be sent to the minors. At least Ciani at age 26, he does have that one more option left. The Yankees could potentially send him to the minors if they want to retain his talent, but not bring him up to New York to start the year there. So that's the episode. Kind of broke down the 2026 versus 2025 season. I think if you're a Yankee fan, I know, we kind of been joking around it that, Cashman hasn't had the most blockbuster of all season just because, they kind of plugged a lot of those holes earlier in the second half of 2025 and retained that talent. That's when, they re-signed Rosario. They gave arbitration offers to all the guys that they have arbitration eligible there. They, re-signed Hill, re-signed Yarbrough. So kind of bring a lot of those same pieces back. But again, a lot of those pieces, new faces, they made like 5 or 6 new face changes around the trade deadline. And there wasn't the overly need to go bonkers this offseason. And their main mission was retaining Bellinger, and it took a while and it was annoying and you might lose him, but did get him. And maybe wanted Tucker, I don't know, maybe wanted another option, maybe wanted Bo Bichette, but I think Tucker, it was just unrealistic for the Yankees. I don't think they weren't in on that. And Bo Bichette, you like him offensively. I just don't know if there was a place for him. And then again, still shelling like $42 million per season for a guy who probably is going to opt out after 1 year. I just don't think the Yankees were interested in that situation there. And you got Bellinger at least locked in for the first 2 years of his contract before he can opt out. But you take it 1 year at a time. At least you got him locked in for 2 years at $32 million, which I think is fair market value, just given some of all these ridiculous contracts like, Tucker making $57.1 million there. So again, I think if you're Yankee fans, have a little bit more confidence in the team going in there. Right around the corner. You're going to get Cole back. Rendon also not going to be there at the start. Again, he might be delayed a month too. Again, he's coming off the elbow procedure. But again, this 2026 Yankees, we don't know what injuries are around the corner. Injuries could happen, but they're in a much better place to start the season, a much stronger team than they were to start the season in April of 2025. Catch you next time.